Welcome to Make Your Shit, a creative empowerment podcast. I'm your host, Kyle F. Andrews. On today's show, we have producer Skye Wathen. Skye Wathen is a producer known for her work on projects like Fallout and WESTWORLD. With a background across many mediums and genres, she has contributed to various projects in the entertainment industry. And despite being a rare LA native, she often works on projects out of town. Outside of work, Skye embodies the true elder millennial spirit, with hobbies such as knitting, reading, eating great food, and spending quality time with her husband, Sean, and more importantly, their dog, Bruce. Skye, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Kyle.
I'm so happy you could be here. Skye and I went to Emerson together. We're film school graduates. We made our way out to LA. I have to ask you, going to Emerson, it's easy to talk about movies, but knowing where we fit in movies and television can always be a little like, what are you going to do when you finally set yourself up in 20 years? So my first question is, when did you realize you wanted to be a producer, and how did you get to the point where producing was the goal?
Sure. So I actually wanted to go to college to be a musical theater actress, and my dad said no, and I was too young and privileged to realize I could try to do that myself if I really wanted to take out student loans. So I had taken a tour of Emerson and fell in love with it. And I was always good with people, so I thought I'd go into PR maybe or something with marketing. So I was a marketing major at Emerson. And once I got there, I found the Evvies, which is the largest student award show in the country. And I just thought it was so cool and such an interesting thing. And I got to learn a lot about TV production and live TV production and just like so many life skills, management. You know, there's a lot. Anybody who goes to Emerson who gets involved in the Evvies, like, you can learn a million things. There's any aspect of what you might want to do with your life you can learn about. And I ended up being a producer on the show my sophomore year. So I just kind of realized I liked putting things together and I liked managing things. And then my technically junior year, because that was my last year in Boston, I didn't produce the show again, but they called me the line producer. And it was the first time they'd done a red carpet event. The show is so different now than when we were at school. So I kind of produced that. But anyway, I started sort of getting a toe dipped in the idea of like budgeting and scheduling and really true production management. And then when I did the Emerson LA program, they had a production management class. And in that, I got to learn, I mean, it couldn't have set me up better for being a PA, because I learned about like what a call sheet is and how to read a one line and how to make one and how to put a budget together and all those things. And I just thought it was so cool to kind of see the bigger picture and and I've always been good at creative problem solving and sort of putting things together and managing things. And so it just really fit into my skill set. And it was great because I really took the opportunity of being a PA to understand what all the different departments were and learn I had no qualms. And I tell younger people now getting into the industry, like, that's the opportunity for you to be like, I don't know anything. Can you tell me about what you do, what your department's about, how you work? You know, that's the time when people are so willing, because you're young, to be like, yeah, let me show you what I do. Let me tell you about visual effects or whatever it is. And you can kind of use that opportunity to really see what you might be interested in.
It's that hands-on learning that kind of makes or breaks whether or not you have an attachment to what you're doing.
Totally. And also just understanding how the different pieces go together, right? Like, so many people don't understand what a grip does versus an electric does versus, whatever. Like, you say sound and people are like, well, yeah, they have to mic people and capture the sound or whatever. But it's such a great opportunity to be able to go, can you tell me more about, like, what does construction do? Like, I get you built a set, but like, what does that mean? So I just sort of tried to be a sponge and learn as much as I could. And then I got an opportunity. That's kind of when I realized, like, I think line producing is what I want to do. And I like being part of all the moving pieces and all the things coming together. From there, I went to assisting a line producer. So it was like great, because that's exactly where I wanted to be.
It's great. The thing I love about line producing is you're basically setting everybody else up for success.
Totally.
What has been your greatest challenge in becoming a line producer and managing the expectations of others?
I think, well, that's an interesting question. So becoming a line producer is challenging because a lot of people don't necessarily want to do it, but because it's money related and because it's very more like, it's the most businessy thing, I guess, you could come up with in the creative thing that we do, right?
Sure. Yeah.
A lot of times studios want to hire the same people because they have a track record and they trust them and they know that they've brought things in on budget before and they know how to schedule, manage a schedule and all the complicated pieces. So it can be really hard as a newer person breaking in because there's just not that same level of experience or trust with those studios. And so a lot of times the same people are getting hired over and over again, whether or not they're the right person for the job. A lot of times they are, and that's a good thing, but sometimes they're not. And but it's a bit of the devil you know. So that aspect can be a little bit challenging. Luckily, I've had some really great mentors and people who've helped me move up in my career. I think, finding everything in this business is a little bit about luck and being in the right place in the right time.
Sure.
So it's also kind of setting yourself up to be able to take advantage of that opportunity when it comes, because that's the part you have control over. Like, you can't necessarily control when it's going to come your way, but you can put yourself in a position so that hopefully when it presents itself as an opportunity, you're there to say, yes, that's the thing I want, you know?
Mm-hmm. I love that you speak about it as an opportunity. And it is. An opportunity is one of those things that comes around because you've set yourself up to do the hard work. But once you get there, it's a little bit more like you have the chance to set what you've done and learn from a new experience. And even though you're taking a risk, just because you may fail that risk doesn't mean that you have failed at your task. Have you, when it comes to protecting your mental health in the industry, in terms of being a producer, having huge budgets, how do you maintain your, I guess, sanity as you are going about that?
Oh, God, that's the question everybody wants an answer to, right?
Yes, please tell me.
Yeah. I mean, I think like everybody, I'm still trying to navigate that myself too. But I have a very supportive, strong partner, which is great. But we've been together almost 15 years. And in those 15 years, we've had to navigate the ups and downs of how me working too much and too hard and not giving enough time to that relationship. And so I think in a way, being in a relationship really helps because I'm like, no, I have to prioritize this other person who is wildly more important to me than my job, right? So I want to do that. So then what do I do to do that? And especially as I move up, which is harder because then people want more demand of your time because you're making more money, you're more responsible, they're expecting more of you, and you want to do a good job. So you have to really strike a balance. And it's to use mental health language, it's setting up boundaries, right? So I try really hard to sort of protect my weekends to the best of my ability. And, I might, if somebody calls me because nobody likes to call anybody, I assume then it's something I actually have to deal with, right? Like if somebody sends me an email or shoots me a text, I can answer that when I have a minute or when I feel like it or get to it Monday or whatever. But if somebody calls, I'm like, okay, this is real because no one likes to call anybody, especially if they're on the younger side. So I kind of, I guess, play that game with myself a little bit. And then I have really great friends and, they understand. A lot of them work in the business too, but a lot of them don't. But they get like, we live in a gig economy and that's kind of essentially what we do. And so sometimes it has to be more work heavy. And sometimes like right now I'm off. I get to go have lunch with them and dinner and, fill my cup with all those things now so that when I'm working and I'm not as available, those touchstones are still there.
That makes sense. Somebody once said to me, it's not that the business has changed, it's just it's gone digital. The work is now digital.
Right.
So in terms of, you've worked on some of the biggest shows. Right now, one of the biggest shows on television, which everybody's very excited about. You didn't always work on the biggest shows on television. I think a lot of folks are interested in getting between leaving the college, starting out, and then moving into these bigger shows. Did you have any experience in the independent scene, independent films, independent TV?
So I did one independent movie. It was $1 million movie called Nostalgia. It was really hard. I have a lot of respect for people like yourself who do independent movies because it's really, am I allowed to curse? It's really hard.
Fuck yeah. The show's called Make Your Shit.
I think what's interesting is independent is so much more challenging because you have to do everything yourself. And I think for a long time, I don't think as much now, but for a long time, like there was the divide of film and TV, right? People look down on TV people a little bit.
I remember
or like,
those days.
Yeah, studio people look down on independent people a little bit. Now I think it's actually a little bit more the opposite. Like if you can do an independent movie, you can definitely do a bigger. It's harder to work with less money than it is to work with more. The box is just a bigger box, right? So it's interesting because I actually think it's harder for people who do big studio projects to go the other way. And I've been fortunate because I've done some like weird YouTube shows, like YouTube Red when that was a thing. And I did a show for Hulu for Funny or Die that was a variety sketch show that was called I Love You America with Sarah Silverman, which was, it was still Sarah Silverman, right? It's a bigger name show, but it's an interesting, different type of production. And so those things I think make you super nimble. So when you go do the studio projects, you actually kind of get to think outside the box in a different way, which I think is like great because you can bring an independent spirit or a lower budget spirit to these big projects. And a lot of times the people who do studio have only ever done big budget, big studio, blah, 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 kind of only know how to do it one way. And they only think about doing it one way. And that's not a bad thing. I mean, there's a lot to be said for studios like things done a certain way. But sometimes, and especially now, where you have these bigger, tentpole TV shows, for example, right? You're basically making 8 movies a season. You need to think outside the box sometimes, and you need to be super creative. And sometimes that comes from, I did this weird show, and we did this, and it works, and like, yeah, you wouldn't have thought of it because it's not how you've done it before, but actually that totally applies. So I think I used to think that having so much weird diversity in my resume was like maybe made it seem like I wasn't focused. But actually now I think I really relish in it because it brings a lot more creativity to the job that I do, even though a lot of people look at being a line producer as not a creative job. It is very creative.
Sure is.
I mean, my job is to execute creative, right? And I want to do that to the best of my ability. I don't like a lot of people think of line producers as the no person. I don't want to say no. I have a box to work in. My job is to manage the money responsibly and spend it wisely. And I want to do that as much as I can and give you everything you want creatively. Sometimes I have to come to you and say, can we do this instead of that? Or can we cut this? Or, that location's not available. Could we do this one instead? Yada, yada, yada. But being able to come from such a diverse background and, having some lower budget, smaller, independent experience, I think really helps me look at those bigger projects differently,
I mean, having the budget experience that you do, that's probably the most essential part of the job. And for me, it's like when you have a script and the script's done, what's the next part? The next part is figuring out how we're going to pay for this.
Right.
So line producing is the very next step once the script is done. What sort of advice or thoughts do you have for writers who want their scripts produced when they need to be a little bit more budget conscious?
So my favorite thing in any script is the army came over the hill. Like, that is the most expensive thing to possibly produce because on the script, it's one sentence that barely takes up half a paragraph or half of a line, right? But that is like...
It's under 99 pages. It's like, It's so short.
It could be 4 days of filming for The Army Came Over the Hill. Like, is it a period piece? What kind of army is it? How big is the army? What are they doing? Who are they fighting? Do they have animals? You know what I mean? So it's like being a little more descriptive. And I know sometimes as a writer, you're trying to hit a page count, right? Or you're trying, because you're thinking it's a action movie, it has to be 90 pages or something like that, right? But sometimes giving a little more depth to that description can actually help people understand your vision.
I want to hold on that for a second because I'm a person who, in reading screenplays, I love a little bit more description.
Yeah.
Especially if dialogue is not what's carrying the story forward, then knowing where we are and who we're with and what we're doing is an essential part of how you're telling the story. So thank you for speaking to that.
Absolutely. I mean, if you don't have that innate understanding, then how am I supposed to take your black and white words on a page and turn them into a plan for creating them, right? For producing them. So, of course you can do the classic, it's this many pages. Let's assume we'll shoot 5 pages a day and build a schedule that way. But I don't like to do that. I like to dig into it and actually think about, how would I really shoot this? How would I really schedule this? What makes sense together? And so some of that can be, you end up with these like strips of sort of nothing because you're like, well, I don't know what this is. Like, it could be half a day of filming. It could be 4 days of filming. But I need to talk to you or the screenwriter or the producer about, like, what is the director, what's your vision for how this thing is getting realized? Sometimes like a Christmas script, for example, right? Like, there's a big difference between it's Christmas time in, LA and it's Christmas time in Maine, right? Like, how much snow do you want? And how much, like, is this winter wonderland Christmas? But like, is it, a sprinkling of Christmas or is it literally, I want to go to Santa's workshop, right? And those things really can help you, if there's a bit more description on the page, understand how to build a plan and how to craft for, a budget. Because there's a version of that movie that's Winter Wonderland that could be $15 million, But there's a lot of compromise that has to go in the $15 million version versus a $30 million version or a $60 million version or whatever, So also part of it too is like, who do you see being the exercise of building a budget really comes down to a lot of like, do you already have people attached? All those kinds of things. Like if you have big casts, you're aiming for a different kind of budget than if you're trying to get big names but want to keep it close, or it's a smaller company or whatever, right? But having a sense for me when I'm able to talk to the creative team is like so helpful in building the plan because I can tell you what I think it might be, but it's not up to me because I'm not the director, I'm not the actor, I'm not the writer, right? So I think if I'm just giving a script cold and I don't get to have that conversation, I need more depth, I need more description because I don't know what's in your brain. I'm not a mind reader, sadly.
Yeah, wouldn't that be nice?
Yeah.
I think that this point is very interesting because, as the producer, you're not the director, you're not the writer, you're not the actor, but you need to get the best work out of all three of those and everybody else on set. What is it like I want to talk about the creative part of that. What's it like being a producer and working with creatives to get the best job that you can out of them?
I mean, I think communication in anything is key, right? Like the biggest thing that I ever come up against in a huge part of my job is communication. So half the time I'm just getting A, B, and C to talk to each other, and I'm just the medium by which I'm getting them in a room or on a phone call to talk to each other. And it's like, okay, great, you guys solved all the problems, didn't need me, but I brought you together, so great. But yeah, I think in terms of working with creative team, like the biggest, again, it's communication, being willing to have hard conversations. Like a lot of times writers get very attached and completely understandably to the things that they've written. But sometimes you can't produce all of them. And sometimes it has to be about prioritizing and, not just for the story you want to tell, but the characters you're trying to convey. And sometimes you might have a scene, for example, that takes place in a hallway and then you're moving into a larger space. Well, the space you really love, which is the actual important scene, doesn't have a hallway that we like to shoot at, right? So can we just move that scene inside the room? Can we put it somewhere we already have? Can we, those kinds of conversations. And some writers or directors are super amenable to that and like, yeah, no problem. We'll put it here or we'll do it with that thing or we can absorb the dialogue into this. And some are like, you're killing their darlings, right? And you're like, how could you make me lose my hallway scene? And if it's super important that it be in that hallway, it really can't be somewhere else, then okay, what other compromises can we make? What other, so it's again, it's just communication. It's being willing and open to talk about the different ways things can be approached. And I'm like I said, I want to say yes. My job is not really to say no. My job is to be responsible. So I want to say yes to you, but I need to understand why the thing that to me on the page doesn't seem critically important is critically important. And then let's come up with a different thing that we can compromise on or figure out so that we can do the thing you're saying is critically important, right? So being able to articulate that is really huge.
Does your job as a producer in the context of the shows you work on, does it include writing? Does it include any creative work?
I am not a writer. My husband is the writer in this couple. But I will say, having been on set, because a lot of times I'm on set for filming as much as I am, in the prep process. And I've definitely, with many writers on Westworld who are with us on set, said, hey, what about this thing? Does that really make sense? Should she be doing that? And sometimes they're like, no, that doesn't work. This is because of why. Or they're like, actually, yeah, that's a really great point. Like, let me go talk to them about that, stuff like that. So there's creative aspects to my job, and I approach my job from creativity. Like, I mean, we're all in this because we wanted to run away to the circus and be creative people, right? I like budgets, I like schedules, but I like them in the context of the bigger picture of the creative thing we're trying to make. And so usually I approach my job from that aspect. Like, what is it that we're trying to say? What is it we're trying to show? What is it we're trying to do? And being able to bring that to the table, I think actually helps make me more approachable as a line producer because, again, there's a historical sense, especially with a lot of creative people, that I'm there to say no when I'm not. That's not why I'm there, Right. My job is to help yourself, right? And to help you bring your vision to life responsibly and smartly and hopefully creatively,
It brings the esoteric down to reality a little bit more.
Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, the box is the box, and that box affords us X, Y, or Z. So if you really need this thing to be, Winter Wonderland, let's just go back to the same idea, right? Then what are we saving, accommodating in the previous part so that we can get to Winter Wonderland, because Winter Wonderland's really expensive. It's awesome. It's beautiful. Great. But there's other things then we have to compromise. So it's just kind of being willing to communicate and work together about how we're going to accomplish those goals.
I'm very much looking forward to your Christmas movie, by the way. I cannot wait. I cannot wait to see what Winter Wonderland you give us. A lot of the people who are listening are starting out their creative journey, whether that's, just graduating from school, thinking about going to school, maybe skipping school entirely, which is a totally great way to approach this. And learning like self-taught. I work with some really great self-taught writers and producers. Is there anything that you wish you had known when you first started out that you would like to share with people just getting out on their journey?
That's an interesting question. I mean, so much of what we do is learning on the job. I really firmly believe that college is not for everybody, especially trade schools, like trades within our business. I mean, you don't need to go to college to become a grip or an electric or a construction worker or so many of the below the line jobs that we have, makeup, hair, costumes. Costumes, maybe you could argue you need to learn how to like sew and those kinds of things, but you really don't have to go to college to do those things. You can get a job as a PA and eventually work your way into those departments, and you're learning on the job. The skill you learn is through work, because it's so specific to what we do, Even construction, there's a million construction workers all over the world who build buildings and houses and all those kind of things. That's very different to the kind of construction we do. I mean, the, nuts and bolts might be the same, but like why you're building the thing you're building is very different, right? And it's not being built to last and all those things, So that in that respect, I think the thing I wish I had realized is like, you don't have to go to college to do those things. I mean, honestly, frankly, I didn't have to go to college to do what I do. The one class I took, the production management class, taught me more about what I do now than any other class I took in college. I mean, college is great, especially for kids who like need to find themselves and maybe don't know what they want to do with their life or anything like that. I was so anxious. Yeah. I was so anxious to get to work that I like didn't do the traditional college experience, It's funny, I was talking to somebody about this the other day. Like, I was just like, okay, cool, let's like get through class so I can be done, graduate, and go to work. Like, I'm ready,
Oh, man, I wish I had that kind of view. I was like, yeah, I'm in college. This is great. My life will never be better.
Which a lot of people need.
Yeah.
I wish our country was more into the gap year concept, because I think a lot of kids coming out of high school have no fucking clue what they want to do with their life. And
sure.
Why are they going to get into a bunch of debt or go to school and like have to take an extra year because they were just fucking around and didn't know what they wanted to do, right? Great, go travel. Go like experience the world or do Habitat for Humanity or something that's going to actually give you some semblance of like time to just sort of breathe and think about it. I think that those kinds of things are so much more valuable. That said, I mean, if you want to be a doctor, yeah, go to school. You have to, But like,
I mean, do you have to?
But like for what we do, I wish I'd realized that kind of stuff more, because, I mean, no shade against college. I liked college. I had a great time. I met some great people. But like, I don't know if I needed it, and shoulda, coulda, woulda, or whatever, right? But like, I think that's the biggest thing is especially. I mean, I think the other thing is, if college aside, like I work with a lot of PAs who I always like to talk to my PAs and see what they want to do when they grow up and who they want to be, right? And you're allowed to change your mind, but it's always nice to sort of get a sense of where they're at. And a lot of them want to be writers and directors, right? Of course. But then you have to actually put in the work. So, yeah.
What are you looking for? So if somebody came to you, if somebody applied to be a PA, what would you, and they didn't have, film school on the resume, what would you get them the job?
I think excitement and interest. Like, you can teach anybody anything, right? You can teach people how to do the specifics of this job, or what it means to go on a run, or how to answer a phone, or things like that. But like, just having some sense of responsibility and excitement and like adulthood, you know what I mean? Like
a little maturity goes a long way.
Yeah,
sure.
Thank you. That's the word I should have used. But like, yeah, I mean, honestly, so many people these days are immature. not even just 20-something-year-olds. Like there are very immature 30-something-year-olds. And it can be really fascinating because our business is a hard business. Our standard work day is a 12-hour day. I mean, that's standard. I work easily 90 hours in a week when I'm working.
Oh, boy.
Yeah. I mean, it's just, is that good, bad, or indifferent? It is what it is. You know what I mean? So what's interesting to me is when, and I don't necessarily want to perpetuate. I'm not one of those people who's like, well, I had to go through that, so you have to too. Like, I'm very against that concept. But it is what it is. Until it changes, that's how it works, right? And so it's interesting to me, particularly with PAs, when they're like, these 12-hour days, they're just killing me. And I'm like, I'm sorry, kid, but if you want to do this, you're going to have to be okay with that. And it's okay if you're not, but this is probably not for you. I mean, in the United States, at least, a standard workday is 12 hours. And if you want to go be on set, that's going to be your day. If you want to be a director, you're going to be working those hours. You're going to be working more than that because when you've wrapped the day, you're going to want to watch dailies and you're going to need to have meetings and you're not always going to get a lunch break because you're going to have to sit and talk to people about something that's happening either that day or the next, or you might have to scout on a weekend. Like there is a level of full commitment that I think a lot of people are kind of not understanding.
Even the actors, you'll spend 12 hours
Right.
working on the same scene, doing it a million times. And then when you go home at night, you got to learn the scene for the next day because it's been changed because
Right.
of what you did on the day.
And I think, to go back to your actual question, I think with young people, it's like, I get it. I don't want to work 12 hours a day either, right? But unfortunately, it is our business until it's not. And I think making the most of those 12 hours that you can, like I said it before, talking to other departments. I mean, my door is always open. And so the PAs that I recognize the most are the ones who come in and are like, hey, could I ask you about blah, blah, blah? Like, would you have time to talk to me about such and such? Sometimes I can't. But I'm a pretty open person, and I very much am an open door policy person. And if I have the time, absolutely come in, ask me the question, because I had people who did the same thing for me when I was a PA, and that's how I learned. That's how I understood what I wanted to do. So I think also an inquisitive spirit is really important because, and the other thing is humility. Like you, especially when you're young and you're starting out, you don't know. I know you think you do, but you don't. And it's okay. I'd rather you ask me how to do something and I will help you learn. And then you'll never have to ask me again. It's like teach a man to fish, right? Like, great. I don't do it wrong because you either think you know or because you just don't want to tell me you don't know how to do it.
Yeah.
I'd rather you tell me, hey, I don't know how to do that. Would you mind showing me?
You can't learn something you think you already know.
Exactly.
And it's such an obstacle that people put in their own way.
Yeah.
I think ego is one of the most detrimental aspects of trying to start a creative career because you may very well be very talented, but talent is not the product. The product is how you use that talent in the scope of the entire production with a community. As far as the community goes, as far as the building the village goes, are there situations where you find more joy in working with people?
I mean, it all comes down to the people you work with. So we work too long and too hard to not work with enjoyable people who you want to see every day, right? So the nice thing, especially as you grow in your career, is you get to figure out who those people are. So my Westworld crew are like family. Especially after 2 seasons, and it's a hard show. It was a really challenging show. You are bonded, because you're going through the experience of the challenge of making a really awesome, really intense show. And I mean, there's always the analogy that this business is like summer camp, right? But the nice thing is that if you get to work often, hopefully, you get to sort of go back to summer camp because you get to go every year and be like, it's my campers and my people and my favorite counselors and all those things and bring them all back together,
There's
right?
always the one that pushes you into the pool.
Yes. So, I mean, I think ultimately that's the reason I'm in it. Content is great. And obviously I'm very fortunate to have worked in some great content. But ultimately, the project isn't necessarily what's drawing me to it. It's the people involved in the project because I love people. I like, I want to be able to meet cool, interesting people. And everyone's brain works so differently. And being able to come together and sort of talk about how the different approaches can be is always so exciting. Like, especially when you're trying to pull off these big, complicated shows, everybody's bringing something to the table. And so being able to be open and available to like best bad idea wins, right? Or really great ideas like that you wouldn't have thought of. I mean, I think that's the thing I think is the best, is like being able to empower everybody else around me to be willing to throw some spaghetti against the wall and see if it sticks, because I think breeding a culture where people are willing to say something they think would be stupid, sometimes that's the best idea that anybody could have come up with. But if they were too afraid to say it because they're too worried about, what people might think of that idea or whatever, that's just, then you lose so much in what might have been the best approach to something.
And one of the things that can get in the way of that is anger. I have, on several occasions seen producers flip out because they're upset somebody did something. It feels very old school. Not that, millennials or Gen Z are incapable of getting angry. Certainly Twitter would beg to differ. But in the scope of doing it, anger is not do you find anger a useful emotion?
No, it's not useful at all.
Yeah.
I mean, of course, everyone gets angry, right? And it's how you handle that anger. I mean, at the end of the day, we're not curing cancer or rocket scientists. So while entertainment is important, I mean, the pandemic taught us that, if nothing else, right? Everyone's stuck in their couch, needs something to watch. It's not life. It's not, like I said, it's not curing cancer. Mm-hmm. So like, we're not changing the world in the sense that like, we're going to, the thing we're doing is so important that like, if we fuck up that one experiment, it could set us back 50 years. It's not that serious, and it shouldn't be. It's make-believe. It should be fun. So I think if you can have an attitude too that's a little unflappable, like a little bit calmer, and just bring some, woo-saw to to it all, like that's also really important, because anger is not an emotion that you should ignore, but you should certainly understand where it's coming from, because a lot of times the anger is coming more from frustration. And so you're like, okay, I'm really more frustrated about this situation. Why am I frustrated about it? And getting to the bottom of that and then being able to productively move forward, that's where anger can be helpful. But it's not yelling and screaming and all that. That's just, who wants to deal with any of that bullshit, right? Like,
Certainly.
I mean.
And everybody, you start building a reputation with that too, then it affects the way people work with you.
Well, and it makes for a lot of scared who are supposed to be collaborators who won't then bring those great ideas to the table because they're like, well, I don't want to get screamed at, right? Or anything like that. I think that's such a useless way of behaving. And it is a super old school way. I mean, there, of course, are still people who that's their way of being. But I think in the world we live in now, too, people aren't as willing to put up with that. And I'm glad for that, because why should anybody put up with being yelled at work, right? Like, at the end of the day, this is work, even though it's fun and we're all doing it because we love it, like, or hopefully, it's still your job. Nobody should be getting yelled at their job unless you truly fuck something up.
If there's a danger, for sure.
If there's a danger, if there's something that is so truly fucked up that costs some insane amount of money. But even then, screaming at somebody is not effective. You have to deal with that, but it's not yelling, and that is just, it's so useless. And it's such a waste of time. It's like, I already, like I said, I'm working 90 hours a week. I only have so much time. Anger is not a useful emotion for me,
Well, on the other side of that, what's your favorite part of the production process? Do you have a point where you're just
collaboration is my favorite part. I love, for what I do specifically, like I love scheduling and I love looking at all the pieces and figuring out how it can all come together and being able to see the bigger picture. A lot departments are obviously very focused on their specific thing, right? And so it's fun to be able to sort of look at special effects and look at stunts and look at construction and look at set deck and go, well, this is how you're all coming together to accomplish the same goal, right? I like budgeting, weird as it sounds. I was terrible at math in high school. Like, if you'd told high school me I was going to do a job with money, I'd have laughed in your face. But it's a very different kind of math, But being able to sort of understand all those pieces, and that in and of itself, looking at a cost report is a way to see how all the pieces are working, and moving money around so that you can afford that really cool stunt or that super awesome car chase or whatever it's going to be. And, or that beautiful dining room or whatever is fun. And being able to work with, ultimately it all comes down to the people. always. So that collaboration is just, it's my favorite part.
Well, you've gotten to collaborate with some really amazing, amazing people, especially, on Fallout and Westworld, Lisa Joy and Jonathan Nolan, who are just absolutely wonderful executive producers. So they are executive producers. You are a producer. Can you give people listening who may not be familiar with the dichotomy of a TV set, what the distinction of the roles are?
Sure. So TV is very different than movies in this respect. In TV, executive producer is like the ultimate goal of a title. Usually it's your showrunners, your writers, maybe a producing director, and a lot of times a line producer can get to a non-writing EP credit as well. On on Fallout Season 1, I'm the line producer, so my credit is produced by, but basically there's lots of writers who get lots of different types of producer credits. They can get anything from an executive producer to a co-producer to a producer to a associate producer or a co-executive producer. It's all just variations on a theme for where they fall in the hierarchy of it all, right? And then people like myself get, different types of producer credits that are, it's really kind of odd distinctions that are just little nuances to like the type of writer, where you are in the writer hierarchy or where you are in the, non-writing hierarchy. Post people, visual effects people, a lot of them get producing credits as well. On Westworld, so the first season I did of Westworld was season 3. I was a production supervisor, which is sort of like a junior production manager, except it's not DGA for reasons. So that was very different because I was much more hands-on on set, but I was working for we called them co-producers, but they were one of them was a UPM, again, non-DGA, mm-hmm. So the other one was co-producer.
Yeah, unit production manager for those
yes.
listening.
And then there was a non-writing EP and there was a line producer. So the structure was, there were a number of people I reported to. And then on season 4, I bumped into one of those co-producer roles. So the main differences are responsibility, right? Like I had responsibility on season 3. I did a lot of the second unit stuff and I was on set every day sort of helping to make sure that the day was functioning. But ultimately, I had bosses above me who were more responsible for making sure everything was on track, on budget, on schedule, all those things. Then I jumped into that role on season 4. So it became more of my responsibility to make sure that everything was functioning and running and affordable and all those things. And then with Fallout, again, I jumped to the next level. So it really is my job, right? It's fully my job to make sure that like we are functioning both offset and onset from a financial standpoint, from a scheduling standpoint, from a holistic standpoint. So it's sort of all variations on a theme, right? That's more in the production management track versus creative track. So on the creative side of things, it's just when you see all those credits at the top of a show, it just usually is about where were they in the writer hierarchy for the most part.
Well, I'll tell you, you must be really good at your job because you are having some incredible, I think the output is pretty stellar, especially in terms of comparison to TV today, TV history. I mean, you're making some of the best shows. With that, though, obviously comes greater risks because, I mean, Fallout is obviously, it has a built-in community. Maybe Westworld didn't, but as a Michael Crichton fan, there are still,
Sure.
things that you need to keep in mind about that. When you're not just doing a original piece, but you're doing an adaptation, what are bigger concerns for you as a producer that you need to keep in mind while you're also trying to stay on budget?
Yeah, I mean, Fallout is obviously the best example of that because the game fans are rabid, right?
And the fidelity on that show is so specific. It's so great.
And it was really important to us that we be able to touchstone to the games and be able to really serve the game fans in the very specifics because gamers are the most ruthless fans. They will rip things apart faster than anybody will.
We sure can.
So
we sure can.
It's like, if you don't have it spot on, they're going to eviscerate you. So we were really, our art department took obviously, and costumes took the heaping load of it, but like really specific about the R&D of touchstoning for the games and making sure that we could be as specific to the recreation of the games as we could, while obviously telling a brand new, interesting story within the context of the world. So I think it's backfilling all of what you're trying to do with the story, backfilling it with things that are valuable to the gamers. Like there's little Easter eggs that, I not as a gamer, don't necessarily understand, like a mini nuke or something like that in there, that like game fans are like, oh my God, or like the Deathclaw skull.
We love
right?
art design, let me tell you.
Yeah.
That's where our money is.
And Westworld, I mean, I came into the show season 3, but I was a big fan of 1 and 2. And so as a viewer, I understood those characters and I understood the world we were living in. So as a producer on the subsequent seasons, even though season 3 had a big shift in where we were in the world, it was important to me to understand where those characters were coming from and their background and who they were as characters, because then when we're on set or we're putting things together, we can say that wouldn't really fit that character, or this makes sense to her, or wouldn't she do that, or he do this, or anything like that,
I love that about Fallout in particular. You have a character that it's just the world. The wasteland itself is a character, and the way the show embraces that is really lovely, because then you get to meet these new characters that you have no relationship with, but still have a context for how they're living their lives. It's really special. When you are in production, do you have a creative routine to keep you motivated, to keep you going?
I mean, so my hobby, like I said in my bio, is knitting. So that's my creative outlet for me, right? I'm not a writer. It's not my interest. I mean, I love writers, and obviously, I wouldn't have a job without writing. We all have to start with a script, right? But for me, for creative outlet, like that's the way I find creativity, just for my own self in my own life. I mean, in work, I really try to understand the world we're showing, the stories we're telling, the characters we're telling, and bring a creative understanding to then why we're doing the set piece we're doing, or why we're building the set we're building, or the costume that needs to be created, or whatever it is, right? And I'm obviously not as like day-to-day hands-on with those things because the departments do them, but understanding when they come to me to say, this set is going to cost more than we thought it was, or this, we need 10 more of these costumes, or makeup needs, fake bodies, or whatever it is. Like I like to really understand the creative that we're making so that I can then properly understand where they're coming from.
I'm just going to say, if you ever want to knit me a vault suit, I won't turn it down.
That would be quite an undertaking.
That would. That's a production in itself. So I'm really excited about everything you are doing in television. Where are you headed next? You're working on Fallout, but where do you see yourself in 5 years?
Sure. I mean, eventually I'd like to get to a non-writing EP credit, because that's sort of the next credit to get to, and running my own show. The shows that Kilter does are unique in that there's a lot of production support. They need them because they're big world-building shows. But the structure is there's a non-writing EP, myself as a line producer, 2 co-producers or unit production managers, depending, again, if they're DGA or not, and then usually 2 production supervisors, and then our whole office staff. So there's a lot of support, which is great, but most shows aren't set up that way. Most shows, television especially, are set up with just a line producer EP, a UPM, and maybe a supervisor, but certainly into a production staff. So kind of the next thing for me is a show where I get to be the main big boss,
Sure, and you deserve that show for sure, And I'm not just saying that as a friend.
And I'm very happy doing what I'm doing, and I'm very fortunate to be in the position I'm in. But sort of whenever Fallout is done, hopefully I get to stay on it for however many more seasons it has.
So 15 years from now.
Then that'll be the next step.
Well, I'm very excited for you to continue on that journey. So I won't ask you for any spoilers for the new season.
I couldn't tell them to you if I wanted to.
Yeah, I will. I'm looking forward to seeing it. So again, my guest today is Skye Wathen. Skye, it has been so lovely having you here. Are you cool hanging around and answering some stupid fucking questions for smart fucking people?
Abso-fucking-lutely.
That's the best answer I've ever gotten. All right, we'll be right back with Skye Wathen with stupid fucking questions for smart fucking people. Welcome back. We are about to ask Skye Wathen stupid fucking questions for smart fucking people. All right, Skye. Which Muppet character do you most identify with?
Ooh, good question. Maybe Snuffleupagus?
Snuffleupagus. Oh my gosh. That's the coolest. I love Snuffleupagus. Anything specific, draw you?
I don't know. He's just a big, awesome non-elephant elephant, and he's lovable and like a sort of a figment of your imagination. I don't know. I just like him.
I love that. And every Muppet that is an animal is named that animal in their name. Go look. Animal
right.
is not an animal. He's a
Okay.
person.
I do also have a fondness for Cookie Monster because on Westworld there was a weird time in HBO where they were doing promo like crossover stuff, and it was Sesame Street was coming to HBO, so we did a promo crossover between Westworld and Cookie Monster that I got to produce. So I got to meet Cookie Monster.
I did see that on your IMDb.
Yeah. So I have one of my IMDb photos is me with Cookie Monster because I have a soft spot for Cookie Monster.
I would have been sweating nervous meeting a celebrity like that. Captain Planet, are you earth, fire, wind, water, or heart?
Probably heart. I'm a strong person, but I'm a little softer than I think a lot of people realize. And ultimately, I think I approach everything from a thoughtful, intentional, heartfelt place. That's even work. That's where I'm trying to come from usually. So I'd say heart.
Honestly, rather have producers with heart, let's say. You wanted to get into musical theater. What is your favorite Broadway musical?
Rent. Hands down forever. It was, it came out when I was a teenager. It had such a soft spot for me. It was the first time I'd ever experienced a musical like that just was so different to your classic, Rodgers and Hammerstein style musical. And I also love Sondheim like forever and always. I got to go see Merrily We Roll Along on Broadway last year with Jonathan Groff and Daniel Radcliffe and Lindsay Mendez, and it was amazing. So anything Sondheim I kind of have a fondness for too, but at the end of the day, if I could only pick one, it would be Rent.
I mean, you could see it 525,600 times and never get tired of it. Would you rather live in Westworld or the Wasteland?
Ooh, that's a tough one.
And not future LA, but Westworld.
Yeah. Oh, that's so interesting. I think the Wasteland, because in Westworld, you don't necessarily know that you're being controlled and have free will, right? And at least in the Wasteland, as fucked up as it is, you get to make your choices, So I think the Wasteland.
That's the best way you could have answered that. That's great. What book would you most want to adapt into a TV series?
That's a tough one. Well, it used to be Game of Thrones. And then obviously that
ship has sailed a little bit on that.
sailed. That's an interesting... I'm an avid reader. I read a lot. Probably, so Daisy Jones and the Six has already been turned into a show. But
by an Emerson grad.
Yes, but I love Taylor Jenkins Reid. I love all of the books she's written. And I love that they're in interconnected worlds, which a lot of people don't quite realize, but they're sort of, I think it's so interesting that she gets inspired by like a random side character in a book and decides to write an entire book about that character. So probably one of the books that hasn't been adapted. Like, I mean, Malibu Rising, growing up in LA, coming from an entertainment family, like I think that would be kind of fun.
I mean, do it.
Yeah.
That sounds great.
Yeah.
If Bruce could speak English, what would he say?
Oh my God. So I don't know if you have a pet. Do you have a pet?
I do, Stella.
Okay, that's right, of course. Do you anthropomorphize her and speak as if you're her?
She's got a posh British accent,
okay.
Yes, quite.
So I don't mean to make him sound dumb. I'm meaning to make him sound more like Alpha from Up. But like if Bruce was a human with a job, he'd be like a cop or a security guard or like something in that vein. And he'd have that kind of voice where he's like trying to be tough. But I end up making him sound dopey. So I don't mean to, but yeah.
He's Paul Blart Mall Cop. I get it.
Kind of.
It's all right. There's no harm there. Outside of Los Angeles, where would you most like to film something?
So I've been very fortunate. I've worked in a lot of places all over the world. I love London. It's one of my most favorite places to film, partially because they do the French hours, which is a 10-hour continuous day. And it is
Get
the
that
best.
over here.
Yes, it's the best. So I love filming in London. I've never worked in Canada, but I'd really like to work in Canada at some point. And surprisingly, New York was a really fun place to work. I didn't think I'd love it as much as I did, but I did. But if I could go anywhere, London is always going to be the choice.
It makes sense. I would film there in a heartbeat. You need a pick-me-up from craft services. What are you picking up?
Coffee. If I could tap into an IV of coffee, I would. Don't think I'm kidding.
Next time we'll get that for you.
Yeah,
Make sure
I
that's
drink far too much coffee than I should. Sometimes it's animal crackers if I really need like a snacky pick-me-up.
Finally, and I may already know the answer to this, but this is not filming. If you could wake up tomorrow in a city that wasn't LA, which one would it be?
I mean, you want to say London because of what we just said. However, there's so many places in the world I want to go, right? So I might pick Tokyo because we're trying to go to Tokyo next year. And that would be pretty awesome if I could just wake up and be there, right? But yeah, I don't know. I love travel and there's so many places in the world I want to go. So probably somewhere new. I mean, it could be, I want to go to Greece. I've never done South America. Sean and I really want to maybe try to do Antarctica someday. So I'd say Tokyo for now, I guess, because that's like the most at the top of my mind.
Tokyo, but you'll build from there for sure.
Yeah, exactly.
That's amazing. Well, thank you so much for coming in, Skye.
Thanks for having me.
It's been a joy talking to you. It really has. So Skye Wathen, you can find her online, and you can also find the show online at MYS Podcast on Twitter and Instagram. I'm your host, Kyle F. Andrews. I will see you next time.